Hey everyone, I'm Ken Klippenstein with Breaking Point's The Intercept edition. I'm joined today for a second time with Raed Jarrar, Advocacy Director of Democracy in the Arab World Now, or DAWN for short. We're going to be talking to you about the Biden administration and Mohammed bin Salman, the leader of Saudi Arabia, at the same time that President Biden is giving all the soaring rhetoric about the situation in Ukraine, the unjust war invasion by Russia. There's also a sort of corollary story to that that's getting much less attention, which is our relationship to one of the most despotic regimes on earth. And not just that, this week is the anniversary week of the brutal murder and dismemberment of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Khashoggi's death led to the founding of DAWN, and they are currently suing MBS with a civil case against him for information about that the U.S. government has with regard to the murder of Khashoggi. And in addition to that, civil liabilities for his widow. And so could you talk to us a bit, not just about the suit, but what the Biden administration did, not just this week of the anniversary, but on the day anniversary of Khashoggi's murder?
It's good to be on the show again. I think the Biden administration has been making one mistake after the other when it comes to Jamal Khashoggi. And Jamal Khashoggi is a case study of the failure of this administration to change course on our foreign policy. So what we saw happen this weekend around the 4th anniversary of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi is not exceptional. It's actually another example of making wrong decisions. So what happened is we have a lawsuit against MBS and many of his team in Saudi Arabia, government officials who participated in planning and executing the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. And the lawsuit got to a point where the judge requested from the US government to give an opinion whether or not MBS has foreign immunity. So rather than declaring that they're not going to get involved in the issue, the Biden administration requested from the judge an extension to weigh in. And that request for an extension happened literally around the weekend of his 4th anniversary. So the Biden administration once again chooses, they get out of their way. They had the option to tell the judge, we're not going to weigh in on this. This is a civil lawsuit. You figure it out, judge. But what the Biden administration said, we are going to weigh in. Give us 4 to 5 more days to give our opinion on whether or not MBS deserves immunity.
Which, by the way, what a weaselly way out of this. When I was talking to people that follow this case very closely, they told me, they said, I expect that they're going to ask for an extension because that neither grants MBS precisely what he wants, nor does it, really take an antagonistic position to him. And, this is a very oil-rich country in the context of, gas prices being what they are, and the administration is very sensitive to that. But when you do something like this, it's kind of like they're trying to have the best of both worlds, it seems like.
I am a pragmatist, and I know that this administration does not have the political will to make grand statements about Jamal Khashoggi.
Right.
But the easy way for the administration to get out of this would have been saying nothing. If they just missed the deadline, which was last week, without saying, yes, MBS deserves immunity, or no, MBS does not deserve immunity, that would have given them an easy way out. But they put themselves in a worse situation by requesting an extension, because now the implication is that they will give an opinion. So they put themselves in a place where they are required now to give an opinion on whether it's a yes or no answer. And of course, that opinion is not automatically adopted by the judge, but it has its weight with the decision.
It suggests that the U.S. government is considering it.
Of course. And I think the fact that the administration is not willing to stay quiet, to stay out of this, and we're not expecting them necessarily to come to our rescue and to help with the effort to hold MBS and his cronies accountable, but we were expecting them to at least stay quiet, and they failed.
Right.
Even with that very low bar, they failed.
What's incredible to me is, what is this administration getting out of this? Because I could go through any number of cases, take, say, just the last few days when OPEC has announced that they're going to decrease oil production, which is going to have the effect of driving up gas prices and the price of everything, because oil figures into every aspect of our economy, how things are shipped, how they're manufactured, since, we have a fossil fuel-based economic system. So not only are they saying they're going to increase production, Saudi Arabia also announced that they're going to continue their renew their relationship with Russia as part of OPEC, which wasn't something that was always the case. And that is just a slap in the face to this administration, to say nothing of the fact of his Biden's visit, which itself was always up in the air. No one was really sure, what or when that was going to happen. And, I could go through any number of embarrassing kind of details about how that unfolded. For example, by the president of the United States being greeted by a provincial governor in Saudi Arabia, which my Saudi friends were like, oh my God, that is like a middle finger in diplomatic terms, to them immediately leaking the contents of the meeting and claiming that Biden never brought up Khashoggi's death. It's just one, humiliation after another. What are they getting out of this? I don't understand.
Nothing. They're getting nothing. And what we're told, the human rights community in Washington, D.C., and the nonprofit community, we're told that we're too naive, we're too principled.
Yeah.
And purist in our demands for accountability. So before the visit happened, we were told that President Biden has to go because in real life, we have to make some concessions to keep the oil flowing and bring the oil prices down.
But the oil is not flowing.
Exactly. That's what we said as well. Like many
how did they respond?
U.S. organizations before President Biden went, we said they're not going to comply even with your realpolitik demands of oil. There are no signs that they're going to do this. And obviously, they did not. So the trip was not only a humiliating trip, not only a trip that gave away the United States political capital and moral capital.
At the same time that they're, trying to mount a case against Russia's conduct and talking about freedom and democracy versus autocracy, what is a better embodiment of autocracy than a government where there's a literal king, not figurative. They behead people for crimes like sorcery and witchcraft. How are we supposed to take seriously anything they have to say about rights?
I mean, yeah, the point that I was saying is that they not only lost this moral argument, which is the U.S. has some sort of a moral high grounds to criticize Russia or criticize Cuba or criticize China for human rights violations, but also nothing came out of this trip. The oil production did not change. OPEC Plus agreement with Russia did not change. The rhetoric from the Saudi government did not change. Actually, the Saudi government led a crackdown on human rights defenders immediately after President Biden left. They have not changed any of
That's a really important aspect to this. This is a lot bigger than just Khashoggi, although that's an important case. This sends a signal to autocrats like him about what they can get away with. And remember, 100%. Khashoggi was a U.S. resident. So this is saying the U.S. government, to whatever extent, is not going to bring the hammer down if a foreign autocrat does something to its residents. That's something really important for Americans to understand, that they have a stake in this beyond, abstract conceptions of human rights.
That is the message that was transmitted by this administration, loud and clear, that the United States government will not hold other governments accountable, even if they kill a U.S. resident.
A prominent one who's well.
Even if they go that far, in case there are some geopolitical calculations that the U.S. will deem in its interest to keep that relationship going. So the U.S. has other calculations about Saudi Arabia, oil, and the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and they're doing those kind of calculations. But meanwhile, you will have a massive, scandalous violation of human rights, such as the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, go completely swept under the rug because of these geopolitical calculations.
And in the context of a young kind of boy king who's about my age and is, in charge of one of the wealthiest states on the planet, and is, getting signals from the Biden administration that, we're not going to do anything. I'm thinking, what is a young new leader message is going to take for that? We're going to be seeing this guy for, conceivably the next 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, and this guy is being taught by the U.S. and Europe and international allies that he can get away with murder, literally. That's what he's being taught before he became king. The stunt that he pulled last week when they made an announcement that he is the new prime minister of Saudi Arabia is nothing short than a political stunt to evade accountability. So what he's trying to play with his legal team is that he's trying to claim head of state immunity by making himself the prime minister. And this is
and so this is what the lawfare is around, that the Biden administration was asked to weigh in on, okay, here's the thing. So it's being covered as though, oh, the king is now the prime minister, so we can't do anything about him in court. But that's not really how it works. So they can claim that, but the US government, the Justice Department, the State Department, and the National Security Council have to come together and say, okay, we recognize him as that.
That's right.
And that's making things extremely awkward for this administration because they don't want to make that determination, but they also don't want to go against this petrostate.
That's right, and like the stunt is very, it's like a joke. The timing of it is very transparent. That he just made himself the prime minister, literally the week of the deadline of making a determination in the lawsuit, and his attorney filed a motion immediately after, requesting that the judge take into account the fact that MBS has become prime minister. So the causal connection is very, very transparent.
It's clearly about this lawsuit.
I mean, like the timing and the motion, this is not something happening in a vacuum. But legally, it's not a slam dunk for their side because there is one head of state in Saudi Arabia, and that one head of state in the kingdom is the king. So the father is still the head of state. And there are very strong legal arguments that when you try to obtain political immunity for the sake of obtaining political immunity, like what he's doing now, that it's invalid. It's obviously happening to evade responsibility, recuse himself from accountability. And the judge should not take that into account. So we are going to make these arguments whether or not the Biden administration comes back to say we recognize him as a head of state, the second head of state, which is not a thing. But we are going to make these arguments. But you're right, like now, the legal case has become a political circus.
Right.
And the reason why it became a political circus is the actions of this administration. This administration could have chosen a path to not get involved in the legal lawsuit by just staying out of it. They didn't have to say yes, they didn't have to say no, they didn't have to respond. They could have just missed the deadline, stayed quiet, and stayed out of it. But now the Biden administration has chosen actively to become a party to a lawsuit that might lead to exonerating MBS.
So that's kind of what I want to end on here, is what do you expect to happen when the deadline, which I believe is, 45 days or so?
That's right.
Rolls around, and then they have to make the decision. Do you think the Biden administration will end up making a filing or request that the judge behave in a certain way, or will at that point they just wash their hands of it?
I mean, I think they put themselves in a very bad spot now. Yeah. It's very difficult for them to not give an opinion. I'm expecting bad news, looking at the pattern of what this administration has done in the last couple of years. I don't expect them to come up with a grand gesture and speak truth to power and take the side of the oppressed. I don't see it happening. So I'm expecting bad news, but we're going to do our best to explain to the judge our point of view. And I think most legal scholars in the US understand that our position is stronger legally. But of course, politics will play its role as well.
So freedom against autocracy, some conditions may apply. It depends on what hemisphere in the world that we're talking about.
That's right.
Raed, thanks for joining me. Once again, this is Ken Klippenstein with Breaking Points, the Intercept edition.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.